The massive council chambers buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for the emergency session. Jake Morrison adjusted his formal Earth uniform and checked his notes one last time. As humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Federation, he had attended hundreds of meetings in this grand hall, but none had felt as important as this one. The threat was real. Everyone knew it. The Void Swarm had already consumed 3 entire star systems at the galaxies edge, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Long-range sensors showed their dark ships moving closer to Federation territory with each passing day. Jake had seen the classified reports. The swarm was massive, organized, and utterly hostile. They destroyed everything in their path and never tried to communicate. Jake looked around the circular chamber at his fellow ambassadors. The tall, blue-skinned Zephyrians sat in their elevated section, their ancient leader Chancellor Veltar whispering with his advisors. The insect-like Nexari clustered together near the center, their compound eyes glittering as they processed information faster than any human could think. Representatives from dozens of other species filled the remaining seats, all united by fear of the approaching darkness. For 30 years, humanity had been part of this great alliance. They had fought in Federation wars, shared their technology, and opened their worlds to alien visitors. Jake's own father had died defending a Nexari colony from pirates. His sister worked as a doctor on a mixed-species research station. Humanity had earned their place here through blood and sacrifice. Chancellor Veltar stood slowly, his ancient form commanding immediate silence. His voice carried across the chamber without amplification, a trick of Zephyrian biology that never failed to impress Jake. Fellow members of the Federation, Veltar began, we face the greatest threat in our recorded history. The Void Swarm shows no mercy and accepts no surrender. Our combined fleets have engaged them 7 times. 7 times we have been defeated. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He had known the situation was bad, but 7 defeats suggested they were facing an enemy beyond anything they had encountered before. Our military advisors have run every simulation. The Chancellor continued. To have any chance of survival, we must consolidate our forces. We must make difficult choices about which worlds we can defend and which we must abandon. The Nexari Prime Minister Kethmo rose from his seat, his mechanical translator converting his clicking speech into standard galactic. The mathematics are clear. We cannot protect all Federation territories. Some members have larger populations, more developed infrastructure, longer histories with the Federation. Logic demands we prioritize based on strategic value. Jake's hands grew cold. He had heard rumors, whispered conversations in the corridors, but he had not wanted to believe them. Surely the Federation would not abandon any of its members. They were all in this together. That was what the Federation meant. The committee has prepared a list, Veltar announced. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing star maps with different regions highlighted in various colors. Green for full protection, yellow for limited support, red for complete withdrawal. Jake's heart stopped. Human. Space glowed red. He stood up quickly, almost knocking over his chair. Chancellor, there must be some mistake. Humanity has 30 colonies with over 2 billion citizens. We have contributed to every Federation military campaign for 3 decades. Our research has advanced medical science throughout the galaxy. Veltar looked at him with what might have been sadness or might have been indifference. Ambassador Morrison, no one questions humanity's contributions. But the committee must consider practical realities. Human colonies are mostly located in the outer rim. They are difficult to defend and far from our core territories. Your species has only been part of the Federation for 30 years, while others have been members for centuries. Our location makes us a natural buffer against the swarm, Jake protested. If you abandon us, they will have a clear path to the inner systems. Kethmol's translator crackled. Human tactical thinking lacks sophistication. The swarm will waste time and resources conquering human worlds. This will weaken them before they reach strategically important systems. Your sacrifice serves the greater good. The word sacrifice hit Jake like a physical blow. They were not talking about protecting humanity. They were talking about using human worlds as bait, letting human families die to buy time for species they considered more valuable. You cannot do this, Jake said, his voice rising. We are Federation citizens. We have rights. We have treaties. Emergency. Powers supersede normal protocols, Valtar replied calmly. The survival of the Federation takes priority over individual member concerns. Jake looked around the chamber desperately, seeking support from other ambassadors. Some avoided his eyes. Others watched with cold calculation, probably relieved that their own worlds were not being abandoned. A few looked genuinely sorry, but none spoke up. The vote was called. Jake watched in horror as representative after representative approved. The abandonment protocol. When the final tally appeared, humanity stood alone. Every other species had voted to sacrifice them. Light years away, Captain Lisa Brady received the emergency transmission aboard the Earth defense ship Valiant. Was patrolling the border between human and Nexari space, a routine mission that had suddenly become humanity's last line of defense. Captain, her communications officer called out, we're getting withdrawal orders from Federation Command. All Federation ships are being recalled immediately. Lisa frowned. Recalled from where? From everywhere, ma'am? Human space is being designated a non-protection zone. All Federation assets are to evacuate within 72 hours. The bridge fell silent. Lisa stared at the message on her screen, reading it 3 times before the words sank in. Around her, Federation ships that had patrolled alongside human vessels for years were already changing course, heading away from the frontier and toward the galactic core. Get me Admiral Hayes at Earth Command, Lisa ordered. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen, grim and aged beyond his years. Lisa, I assume you've seen the orders. Sir, this has to be a mistake. The Federation wouldn't abandon us. Admiral Hayes shook his head slowly. It's real, Captain. I just finished a conference with the Federation Defense Council. We're on our own. All Federation protection is being withdrawn. All joint defense platforms are being deactivated. All military cooperation agreements are being suspended. Lisa felt the deck seem to shift beneath her feet. What about our colonies? New Terra has over 50 million people. Kepler Station has families, children. They're all being classified as non-essential by Federation standards, the Admiral said bitterly. We've been deemed expendable. On the mining colony of Kepler 442b, Dr. Ben Clark was working late in his laboratory when his Nexari research partner Zeke H entered the room. Ben looked up from his microscope, expecting their usual friendly greeting. Instead, he saw Zeke H packing equipment to transport containers. What's going on? Ben asked. Zeke's translator was flat and emotionless. Research partnership is terminated. All Nexari personnel are being evacuated from human territories. Evacuated? Why? Our project is making breakthrough progress on the bacterial samples from the swarm debris. Human space is no longer considered safe for Federation citizens. Zeke H replied without looking at him. I have orders to destroy all shared research data and remove all Federation technology. Ben watched in shock as his partner of 5 years began systematically erasing their work. Zeke, we've been friends. We've worked together, published papers together. You were at my daughter's birthday party last month. For a moment, Zeke H paused. Personal attachments cannot override survival. Imperatives. The Federation has made its choice. Within hours, Federation ships were departing from human space throughout the galaxy. Defense platforms went dark. Research stations were abandoned. Trade agreements were voided. 30 years of cooperation and alliance dissolved in a single. Jake Morrison sat alone in his empty embassy office, staring out at the Federation capital world skyline. His staff had been ordered to evacuate. His diplomatic credentials had been revoked. Soon, he would board the last human transport, leaving Federation space. His communicator buzzed with a message from Earth. President Collins wanted a full report on what had happened. Jake laughed bitterly. What could he say? That humanity had been betrayed by every ally they had trusted? That their friends had thrown them to the wolves to save themselves? He began typing his report. The words were hard to find, but the message was simple. Humanity was alone in a dangerous galaxy, abandoned by those they had called friends. The Void Swarm was coming, and there would be no help from anyone. But as Jake wrote, something else began growing inside him, alongside the shock and pain. Anger. Cold, focused anger. The Federation thought humanity was expendable. They thought human worlds could be sacrificed without consequence. Jake Morrison would spend the rest of his life making sure they learned how wrong they were. Commander Alex Stone stood on the command deck of New Terra Colony, watching the approaching ships through the main viewing screen. 3 years had passed since the Federation abandoned humanity, and the vultures had finally come to pick at the bones. The ships were Kravik raiders, a species known for attacking weak targets and selling survivors into slavery. Their sleek vessels moved in perfect formation, confident in their superiority over the abandoned human colony. Alex counted 12 ships, each one more advanced than anything the colonists possessed. Sir, they're demanding our surrender, reported Lieutenant Jenny Adams from the communications station. They say they'll spare the children if we don't resist. Alex looked around the cramped command center. His defense force consisted of 30 volunteers with mining equipment converted into weapons, 2 outdated patrol ships, and whatever courage they could muster. The math was simple. They should surrender and hope for mercy. Tell them we're thinking about it, Alex said calmly. Buy us some time. The colony had been preparing for this moment since the Federation withdrawal. When the defense platforms went dark and the military advisors left, the colonists knew they would have to defend themselves. Alex, a former Federation Marine, had been elected to lead their makeshift defense force. Jenny, send word to the mining tunnels. Execute Plan Omega. Jenny's fingers flew over her console. Throughout the colony, families began moving into the deep mining shafts that honeycombed the planet's crust. It was not evacuation. It was preparation for a different kind of war. The Kravik ships moved closer, expecting the usual pattern of fear and submission they had encountered from other abandoned colonies. Their leader, War Captain Neckmer, had conquered 17 human settlements in the past 2 years. Humans were profitable slaves, strong enough for heavy labor, but too primitive to be dangerous. Alex watched the enemy formation through his tactical display. The Kravik were following standard attack patterns, just as their Federation files had indicated. But the Federation had always fought them in space, ship against ship. Humans were about to try something different. Confirmed, sir, Jenny reported. All families are secure in the deep tunnels. Mining charges are in position. Good. Now comes the hard part. Alex activated the colony's general communication system. This is Commander Stone to all defense teams. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to survive. Use every dirty trick you can think of. The first Kravik landing craft touched down in the colony's main plaza. Armored raiders poured out, expecting terrified civilians. Instead, They found empty buildings and silence. Their leader barked orders in his harsh language, directing his troops to spread out and search for the humans. The first explosion came from beneath their feet. The mining charges Alex had ordered placed under the plaza turned the ground into a crater, swallowing 6 raiders and their landing craft. The survivors looked around in confusion, trying to understand what had happened. That was when the second phase began. From windows, rooftops, and hidden positions throughout the colony, human defenders opened fire. They used mining lasers, construction tools, and weapons salvaged from abandoned Federation equipment. Their aim was poor, and their weapons were improvised, but they had something that Kravek did not expect. They had fury. 3 more landing craft descended, bringing reinforcements. Alex watched from his command post as human defenders fell back through the colony streets, leading the raiders deeper into prepared positions. Every building had been rigged with traps. Every intersection was a potential ambush site. "Sir, we're getting reports from Team 7, Jenny called out. "They've taken heavy casualties, but they've destroyed 2 more landing craft." Alex nodded grimly. The plan was working, but the cost was terrible. Good people were dying to defend their homes. People who should have been protected by the Federation were fighting with mining tools against professional soldiers. On the main screen, he watched a group of young colonists emerge from a building behind a squad of Kravek raiders. They carried containers of industrial acid, typically used for ore processing. The raiders never saw them coming. The battle raged for 6 hours. Gradually, the pattern became clear to War Captain Neckmer. The humans were not fighting like civilized beings. They used ambush tactics, booby traps, and weapons that violated every convention of warfare. Worse, they seemed to have no concept of honorable surrender. When his troops cornered a group of human defenders, expecting them to lay down their weapons, the humans instead detonated explosives that killed everyone in the room. When his soldiers captured what appeared to be civilians, they turned out to be fighters who had hidden weapons and used their captivity to get close to important targets. By the time the sun set on New Terra, Vecmer had lost 8 of his 12 ships and more than half his raiders. The humans were still fighting from the tunnels beneath the colony, turning the entire planet into a maze of death traps. War Captain, his second-in-command, reported, "The humans are using the mining tunnels to move fighters between battle zones. They appear to know the location of every one of our troops." Vecmer studied the tactical display. This was supposed to have been an easy conquest. Human colonies were defenseless. Everyone knew that. But these humans fought like creatures with nothing to lose and everything to gain. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the other raid fleets," his communications officer announced. "Similar situations at Kepler Station and Darwin's World. The humans are not behaving according to expected parameters." Meanwhile, in the deep tunnels beneath New Terra, engineer Maya White was working on a project that would change everything. While the battle raged above, she had been reverse engineering equipment from an abandoned Federation research station. "Hand me the power coupling," she said to her assistant, Dr. Carl Lopez. "I think I've figured out how their shield generators work." Maya had been a mining engineer before the Federation withdrawal. She understood machines, power systems, and how to make things work with limited resources. When the Federation scientists evacuated, they had left behind damaged equipment. Assuming it was worthless, Maya thought differently. She had spent 3 years taking apart Federation technology, learning how it worked, and figuring out how to build similar devices with human materials. The shield generator she was assembling used principles the Federation had never shared with humanity, but Maya had learned them by studying broken equipment and abandoned research notes. "The power requirements are enormous," Carl observed. "We don't have fusion reactors like the Federation ships." "No," Maya agreed, "but we have something else. We have desperation and creativity. She connected the final components. The Federation builds everything to last forever and work perfectly. We just need it to work long enough. Above them, the battle was reaching its climax. Alex Stone watched as the remaining Kravek ships prepared to retreat. They had come expecting easy prey, and found instead a planet full of humans who refused to die quietly. "Sir," Jenny reported, "Maya's team is ready to test the shield generator." Alex smiled grimly. "Tell them to light it up." A shimmering barrier appeared around the colony's power station, deflecting Kravek weapons fire. The raiders stopped there. Attack. Staring in confusion at technology they thought only the Federation possessed. But Maya's generator was different from Federation shields. It was crude, unstable, and would probably burn out within hours. But it was also human-built, human-designed, and human-operated. The Federation had never shared their advanced technology, so humans had learned to build their own. War Captain Vecmer made his decision. This was not the easy conquest he had expected. The humans were dangerous, unpredictable, and apparently capable of producing technology that matched Federation standards. He ordered his surviving ships to retreat as the Kravek vessels disappeared into space. Alex Stone surveyed the damage to his colony. 37 colonists had died defending their homes. The main plaza was a crater, and half the buildings were damaged or destroyed, but they had won. Against impossible odds, with improvised weapons and desperate tactics, they had defeated a professional military force. "Jenny, send a message to Earth Command," Alex ordered. "Tell them New Terra is still free. Tell them the Kravek learned that humans don't die easy." Similar messages were coming in from human colonies throughout the galaxy. At Kepler Station, Commander Sarah Blake had used the asteroid mining equipment to destroy 3 raider ships. On Darwin's world, Captain Mike Taylor had organized the colonists into guerrilla units that made occupation impossible. The pattern was becoming clear. Humanity had been abandoned by the Federation, but they were not helpless. They were adapting, learning, and fighting back with a determination that surprised everyone, including themselves. In the deep tunnels of New Terra, Maya White was already working on her next project. She had learned how to build shields. Now she wanted to learn how to build weapons, real weapons, the kind that would make raiders think twice about attacking human colonies. The Federation had abandoned humanity, thinking they were too weak to survive. But humanity was learning that strength came in many forms. Sometimes it came from advanced technology. Sometimes it came from superior numbers or better training. Admiral Kate Lewis walked through the construction yards orbiting Earth, watching the birth of humanity's new fleet. 5 years had passed since the Federation abandoned them, and everything had changed. The ships being built here looked nothing like the sleek Federation vessels that once protected human space. These ships were different, harder, built by people who had learned that the galaxy was not friendly and that survival required strength. Admiral called Chief Engineer Pete Jackson, floating over on his work platform. "The first batch of Reaper-class destroyers is ready for testing. Maya's new designs are installed and operational." Kate nodded, studying the vessel before her. The destroyer was smaller than Federation ships, but packed with weapons that no alien mind had conceived. Maya White had spent 3 years reverse engineering abandoned Federation technology, but she had not simply copied it. She had improved it. "What's the power output on the main gun?" Kate asked. 40% higher than standard Federation plasma. "Cannons," Pete replied proudly. Maya figured out how to compress the energy matrices using human manufacturing techniques. "The aliens never thought to try our approach," Kate smiled. The Federation had always treated human technology as primitive, barely worth studying. They had shared some of their advanced systems, but had never bothered to learn from human innovations. That mistake was about to cost them dearly. In the research labs deep within Earth's moon, Dr. Sam Parker was making discoveries that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Sam had been Ken Clark's research partner before the Federation betrayal. When the aliens abandoned their joint projects, Sam had been left with fragments of void swarm technology that Federation scientists had deemed too dangerous to study. Computer, display analysis of sample 77 Alpha, Sam commanded. The holographic display showed the molecular structure of a piece of void swarm armor recovered from the debris of their first attacks on Federation space. Sam had been studying these fragments for 2 years, trying to understand how the swarm built their ships and weapons. Fascinating, he murmured to his assistant, Dr. Linda Chun. Look at this protein chain. The Federation scientists thought it was random, just biological waste, but it's not random at all. It's a communication network. Linda leaned closer to examine the data. You mean the swarm ships are actually alive? More than that, Sam replied. Excitedly, they're all connected. Each ship is like a cell in a larger organism. The Federation has been fighting individual ships when they should have been targeting the network connections. This discovery would change everything. The Federation's rigid military tactics had failed because they treated the Void Swarm like a normal enemy fleet. But humans, with their tendency to think outside established patterns, had spotted something the aliens missed. Captain Neil Turner stood on the bridge of the EDS Horizon, humanity's first long-range exploration ship built after the abandonment. His mission was simple: scout beyond human space and gather intelligence on both the Void Swarm and the Federation's war effort. What he had found was not what anyone expected. Captain, reported Navigator Amy Davis, we're approaching the former Federation research station at Sigma 7. Sensors indicate the station is still operational. Neil frowned. According to Federation records, Sigma 7 had been evacuated months ago as the Void Swarm advanced. But his sensors clearly showed power signatures and life signs aboard the station. Take us in quietly, he ordered. I want to know what's really happening out here. As the Horizon approached the station, the truth became clear. The Federation had not evacuated Sigma 7. They had abandoned it, leaving the mixed species research team to face the Void Swarm alone. The scientists and their families were trapped, waiting for a rescue that would never come. Captain, Communications Officer Rick Martinez called out, we're receiving a distress signal. Multiple species requesting immediate evacuation. Neil made a decision that would define humanity's new role in the galaxy. Signal the station. Tell them the Earth Defense Ship Horizon is responding to their distress call. The rescue operation took 6 hours. Neil's crew evacuated over 300 beings from a dozen different species, including many who had once worked alongside human scientists before the betrayal. The irony was not lost on anyone involved. Dr. Vera Kowalski, the station's former human liaison, met Neil in the cargo bay where the refugees were being housed. Captain, I don't understand. Why did Earth send a ship to rescue us? The Federation abandoned this sector. The Federation abandoned us too, Neil replied simply. But humans don't abandon people who need help. Word of the rescue spread quickly through refugee networks and hidden communication channels. Other abandoned Federation outposts began sending distress calls, hoping that humanity might succeed where the Federation had failed. Back on Earth, President Collins convened an emergency meeting of the human leadership. The conference room was filled with military commanders, scientists, and colonial administrators who had spent 5 years rebuilding human civilization from scratch. The situation is clear, President Collins began. The Federation is losing the war against the Void Swarm. Their rigid tactics and political infighting have cost them nearly half their territory. Meanwhile, our colonies are not just surviving, they're thriving. General Roy Davis, who had coordinated the defense of the Outer Rim colonies, stood to address the group. Our tactical successes against raiders and swarm scouts have proven something important. Human adaptability gives us advantages that Federation species lack. We can change our strategies faster than they can analyze them. Admiral Kate Lewis added her perspective. Our new ships are ready for combat operations. Maya's technology improvements have given us weapons and defenses that match or exceed Federation standards. But more importantly, our crews think differently than alien crews. The discussion turned to a question that would define humanity's future. What should they do with their newfound strength? Maya White, now promoted to Chief of Advanced Technology Development, presented her latest breakthrough. I've successfully reverse-engineered Federation faster-than-light communication systems, but our version is better. Human intuitive design processes have created a network that's more flexible and harder to intercept than anything the Federation uses. This was the final piece of the puzzle. With advanced weapons, skilled crews, and superior communications, humanity was no longer the weak species that had been abandoned 5 years ago. They had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Neil Turner's rescue missions were revealing the true state of the Federation. Species after species had been abandoned as the leadership retreated to core worlds, sacrificing outer territories to buy time. The same logic that had doomed humanity was now being applied to other Federation members. Captain's log, Bay 47 of Operation Lighthouse, Neil recorded. We've now evacuated 17 abandoned stations and colonies. Each rescue reveals the same pattern. The Federation leadership is preserving their own species while sacrificing anyone they consider expendable. The rescued beings brought with them intelligence about Federation fleet movements, swarm attack patterns, and the growing panic in the core worlds. Humanity was gaining a complete picture of a galactic war that was going very badly for their former allies. Dr. Sam Parker made another crucial discovery while studying swarm samples brought back by Neil's missions. The Void Swarm isn't just one enemy, he announced to the research team. It's multiple swarm clusters, each with different weaknesses. The Federation has been using the same tactics against all of them, which is why they keep losing. Human scientists began developing specialized weapons for each type of swarm cluster. Unlike the Federation's one-size-fits-all approach, humans created adaptive strategies that could be modified as new information became available. The transformation was complete. Humanity had evolved from abandoned refugees into the galaxy's most effective fighting force. They had done this not by copying Federation methods, but by developing their own approaches based on human strengths. In the Outer Rim territories, human colonies had become beacons of hope for abandoned populations. Throughout the galaxy, the species that had been written off as expendable were discovering that humans offered something the Federation never had, the promise that no one would be left behind. Admiral Kate Lewis stood again in the construction yards, but now she was looking at something unprecedented. The first human dreadnought was nearing completion, a massive vessel that incorporated everything humanity had learned about warfare, technology, and survival. The ship was named Defiance, and it would carry a message to the galaxy that could not be ignored. Humanity had been abandoned, betrayed, and left to die. Instead, they had become stronger than ever before. The Federation had created their own worst nightmare. In trying to sacrifice humanity to save themselves, they had forged an enemy more dangerous than the Void Swarm itself. Soon, they would learn the price of their betrayal. Colonel Donna Hill watched through the main view screen as her fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of what had once been Nixari territory. 7 years had passed since the Federation abandoned humanity, and now she was returning to collect what was owed. The sight before her would have been impossible to imagine just a few years ago. 50 human warships hung in space, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that no Federation engineer had ever conceived. These were not the desperate survivors who had been thrown away like garbage. These were conquerors. Colonel reported. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Tony Brooks, were detecting multiple Nexari distress signals from the inner system. The Void Swarm hit them hard 6 months ago. Dana smiled coldly. The same Nexari who had voted to abandon humanity were now crying for help. The irony was perfect. Any Federation response to their distress calls? Negative, ma'am. The Federation fleet pulled back to core territories 3 months ago. The Nexari have been on their own since then, just like humanity had been left alone. Dana remembered this emergency council session where Ambassador Jake Morrison had begged for Federation support. She remembered how the Nexari Prime Minister had coldly calculated that human lives were expendable. Open a channel to the Nexari government, Dana ordered. The insectoid face of Emergency Administrator Cadeval appeared on the screen, his compound eyes wide with what humans had learned to recognize as fear. Behind him, Dana could see the chaos of an evacuation in progress. Unknown vessels. Cadeval clicked frantically. This is Nexari Prime. We require immediate assistance. The Void Swarm has breached our outer defenses. We have millions of civilians in need of evacuation. Dana let the silence stretch for several seconds before responding. This is Colonel Donna Hill of the Human Galactic Defense Force. We received your distress call. The change in Cadeval's posture was immediate. His translator struggled to process what might have been shock or disbelief. Humans? But you were abandoned years ago. How do you have warships? We adapted, Dana replied simply. Now, about your evacuation request. My ships can certainly assist with transporting your population to safety. What are you prepared to offer in exchange? Exchange? Cadeval's voice rose several octaves. This is a humanitarian crisis. We need immediate help. Dana studied her. Fingernails, a gesture of casual indifference that she knew would terrify the desperate alien. When humanity faced the Void Swarm alone, did the Nexari offer humanitarian assistance? When human colonies called for help, did you respond out of kindness? The silence from the Nexari administrator was answer enough. Here are my terms, Dana. Continued. Full territorial surrender of the Nexari outer colonies to human administration. Complete access to all Nexari military technology and manufacturing facilities. And a formal apology for your role in abandoning humanity to die. Those terms are impossible, Cadeval protested. We are a sovereign Federation member. You cannot simply demand our territory. Dana gestured to Lieutenant Brooks, who brought up a tactical display showing the approaching Void Swarm. Administrator, you have approximately 6 hours before the swarm reaches your homeworld. My ships can evacuate your entire population in 4 hours. Or you can wait for Federation rescue ships that will never come. While Dana negotiated with the desperate Nexari, Captain Paul Green was leading a very different kind of mission deeper in former Federation space. His strike force of 12 human ships had been hunting Void Swarm clusters for 3 months, using tactics that no Federation commander had ever attempted. Target acquired, announced his weapons officer, Commander Lisa Park. Swarm cluster designation Omega-7, approximately 40 vessels. Paul studied the tactical display. The Void Swarm cluster was feeding on the remains of a Zephyrian research station, absorbing the biomatter and technology to strengthen itself. Standard Federation doctrine would call for a massed frontal assault with overwhelming force. Paul had a better idea. Lisa, prepare the neural disruptor torpedoes. Target the cluster's main communication nodes. I want them deaf and blind before they know we're here. The neural disruptor torpedoes were Dr. Sam Parker's latest innovation, weapons specifically. designed to attack the biological network that connected individual swarm ships. When the Federation scientists had dismissed swarm biology as irrelevant, they had missed the key to defeating them. The torpedoes launched silently, invisible to swarm sensors until they detonated directly inside the cluster's communication network. Instantly, the organized swarm formation dissolved into chaos as individual ships lost contact with the collective mind. "Now hit them with everything," Paul ordered. Human ships opened fire with weapons that combined Federation technology with human engineering improvements. Plasma cannons that fired faster and hit harder than their alien counterparts. Missile systems that adapted their targeting in real time. Shield disruptors that exploited weaknesses in swarm bio-armor. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the entire swarm cluster had been destroyed with 0 human casualties. Captain's log, Paul recorded as his ships moved away from the debris field. Omega-7 cluster eliminated using standard human anti-swarm tactics. Number: damage to human vessels. Estimated Federation casualties to defeat the same cluster would have been 60% of attacking force. This was the new reality. Human forces were not just surviving against the Void Swarm. They were winning decisively, using strategies that Federation minds could not comprehend. On the research vessel ED's Discovery, Dr. Grace Ford was completing work on humanity's most ambitious project yet. She stood in the main laboratory, watching as technicians made final adjustments to a device that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. "Doctor," called her assistant, Engineer Mark Williams, "the swarm tech integration is complete. All systems are showing green." Grace nodded, studying the readings on her display. What she had created was unprecedented. A fusion of captured Void Swarm biotechnology with human engineering principles. The result was a weapon system that could not only destroy swarm clusters, but could actually turn their own technology against them. "Begin the field test," she ordered. The device activated, sending out a signal that mimicked swarm communication patterns. In response, pieces of swarm debris throughout the test area began moving, following commands from Grace's laboratory. She had effectively hijacked the swarm's biological network, turning their own ships into weapons against them. "Remarkable," she murmured. The Federation spent decades trying to destroy swarm technology. We learned to control it instead. Back in Federation core space, Chancellor Valtar sat in his private chambers, reading reports that filled him with growing dread. The Nexari had surrendered their outer territories to human forces. The Kethari Republic had signed a mutual defense pact with Earth. 3 more Federation species had formally requested human protection. His aide, a young Zephyrian named Delmar, entered with the latest intelligence briefing. "Chancellor, we have confirmed reports of human fleet movements throughout the former Outer Rim territories. Their ships are appearing in systems that should be impossible for them to reach." "What do you mean impossible?" Veltar asked wearily. "Sir, human vessels are using hyperspace routes that our charts mark as impassable. They seem to have developed navigation technology that exceeds our own capabilities." Veltar closed his eyes. This was worse than his worst fears. Humanity was not simply surviving. They were thriving, expanding, and demonstrating technological capabilities that the Federation had never imagined possible. "What about our own war effort against the Void Swarm?" Dalmar hesitated before answering. The 7th Fleet was destroyed at Kepler 9. The 10th Fleet retreated from the Gamma Sector after losing half their ships. Admiral Vekmur's task force has been missing for 3 weeks. Each defeat represented thousands of lives lost and entire. Star systems abandoned to the swarm. Meanwhile, human forces were winning victory after victory using tactics that Federation commanders dismissed as impossible. The communication panel in Veltar's chamber activated, displaying an incoming transmission. from an unexpected source. The face that appeared was older, harder, and marked by years of war, but Veltar recognized it immediately. Jake Morrison, the same human ambassador who had begged for Federation protection 7 years ago. Now he wore the uniform of a human admiral, and his eyes held no trace of the desperate hope that had once made him seem weak. "Chancellor Veltar," Jake said without emotion, "I believe we need to talk." "Admiral Morrison," Veltar replied carefully. "I heard reports of your recent activities in former Federation space." "Former Federation space," Jake repeated. "Yes, that's your description. The Federation seems to be shrinking rapidly these days." The implied threat was clear. Human forces were moving into territories that the Federation could no longer defend, offering protection to species that the Federation had abandoned, and demonstrating military capabilities that made them the strongest force in the galaxy. "What do you want?" Veltar asked. Jake's smile was cold and utterly without mercy. "I want what you denied humanity 7 years ago, Chancellor. I want to discuss terms for your survival." The galaxy had turned upside down. The species that had been deemed expendable now held the power to determine who lived and who died. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the HGS Retribution, watching as the last Void Swarm cluster died in the flames of human weapons. 8 years had passed since the Federation abandoned humanity, and now the swarm that had terrorized the galaxy was finally broken. "Admiral," reported Captain Helen Scott, "all swarm vessels in this sector have been eliminated. The bio-network is completely severed." Jake nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the final battle of the Void War. Human fleets had systematically destroyed every swarm cluster using tactics that the Federation had never understood. Where alien commanders saw individual ships, humans saw a connected organism that could be killed by cutting the right connections. "Signal all fleet commanders," Jake ordered. "The Void Swarm is finished. Begin Phase 2 operations." Phase 2 was not about fighting the swarm. The swarm was gone. Phase 2 was about collecting payment from those who had abandoned humanity when the fighting started. On the bridge, Communications Officer Nancy Webb activated the long-range transmitter. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Federation worlds. They're asking for human protection against remaining swarm fragments." Jake smiled without warmth. "Tell them we'll consider their requests after we finish our business with the Federation leadership." The HGS Retribution and her escort fleet turned toward the Zephorian homeworld, where Chancellor Veltar waited with what remained of the Galactic Federation government. It was time for the final accounting. Chancellor Veltar stood in the Great Council Chamber, where 8 years ago he had voted to abandon humanity. Now the same hall was filled with refugees from dozens of worlds, survivors of species that had once commanded star fleets and ruled entire sectors. The irony was bitter. The chamber where they had declared humanity expendable was now their last refuge, and their only hope for survival came from the very species they had betrayed. "Chancellor," whispered his aide Delmar, "the human fleet has entered our system. Admiral Morrison is requesting permission to dock." Veltar closed his ancient eyes. Permission to dock. As if Jake Morrison needed permission for anything. Human ships controlled every hyperspace route in Federation space. Human forces occupied former Federation worlds. Human weapons had saved the galaxy from the Void Swarm. "Grant his request," Veltar said quietly, "and prepare the council chamber for a formal session." An hour later, Jake Morrison walked into the chamber where his people had been condemned to death. He moved with the confidence of absolute victory, followed by a guard of human soldiers whose presence sent ripples of fear through the assembled alien dignitaries. Jake looked exactly the same as he had 8 years ago, except for his eyes. The desperate hope that had once marked him as weak was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Cold calculation. "Honorable Chancellor," Jake said, his voice carrying easily through the silent chamber. "Former prime ministers. Distinguished. Representatives of what was once the Galactic Federation." The formal words held no respect, only mockery. Everyone present understood that they were no longer the powers they had once been. "I come before you today, not as a supplicant seeking aid," Jake continued, "but as the representative of the force that has saved this galaxy from destruction. Humanity has done what the Federation could not. We have defeated the Void Swarm." Murmurs of fear and resentment rippled through the assembly. Several alien representatives shifted uncomfortably, remembering their votes 8 years ago. "The question now," Jake said, his voice growing harder, "is what should be done with those who turned their backs on humanity when we needed help most." Chancellor Valtar rose slowly from his seat. "Admiral Morrison, surely you understand that difficult decisions had to be made. Resources were limited. We believed we were acting for the greater good of the galaxy." Jake turned to face the ancient Zephyrian directly. "The greater good. Yes, I remember those words. You used them when you condemned 2 billion human beings to death. You used them when you abandoned our colonies to face the swarm alone." The chamber fell silent. Everyone remembered that day, but none had expected to face consequences for their choice. "But you were wrong about something important," Jake continued. "You thought humanity was weak. You thought we would die quietly and buy you time to save yourselves. Instead, we became stronger than any of you imagined possible." Commander Lisa Brady, now bearing the rank of Fleet Admiral, entered the chamber with a datapad containing humanity's terms. She had been present at the original abandonment, commanding a patrol ship when the Federation forces withdrew. Now she commanded the largest fleet in galactic history. "These are humanity's conditions for your continued existence," Lisa announced, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Full territorial surrender of all former Federation core worlds to human administration. Complete disarmament of all remaining Federation military forces. Immediate transfer of all advanced technology and manufacturing capabilities to human control." The gasps and protests that erupted from the assembly were quickly silenced by Jake's raised hand. "You will retain limited self-governance over your homeworlds," he continued, "under human oversight. Your people will be protected, fed, and provided with medical care. But you will never again make decisions that affect the fate of other species." "This is slavery," protested the Nexari representative, his translator crackling with outrage. "You cannot simply conquer the entire galaxy." Jake's expression did not change. "Can't we? Who is going to stop us? The Federation that couldn't defeat the Void Swarm? The military forces that abandoned their own allies to die?" The truth hung in the air like a weapon. Humanity now possessed the most advanced fleet in the galaxy, weapons that could turn swarm technology against itself, and the tactical knowledge to defeat any enemy they faced. More importantly, they had the will to use that power without hesitation. "You see," Jake continued, beginning to pace before the assembled representatives, 8 years ago, you taught humanity a valuable lesson. You taught us that mercy is weakness, that cooperation is foolishness, that in a dangerous galaxy, only the strong survive." He stopped directly in front of Chancellor Valtar's seat. "We learned that lesson very well." Dr. Ben Clark, one of the few humans present who remembered the old ideals of cooperation, watched from the observer section with mixed feelings. He had once believed in the Federation's promise of unity among species. Now he saw the cost of that broken promise. The humans around him were not the same people who had once sought friendship with alien species. They had been forged by betrayal into something harder, more ruthless, and utterly without trust in anyone but themselves. What about justice? Asked a representative from the Cathari Republic. What about the principles of civilization? Jake laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Justice? You want to discuss justice? Justice would be abandoning you to face extinction alone, just as you abandoned us. Justice would be watching your worlds burn while we protect only ourselves. The chamber erupted in terrified whispers as the representatives realized what he was implying. But we won't do that, Jake continued, his voice cutting through the noise. Not because you deserve mercy, but because humanity has learned to be more practical than the Federation ever was. Dead subjects provide no value. Grateful subjects, however, can be quite useful. The final terms were presented without room for negotiation. The Federation would become a series of human protectorates, governed by human administrators and defended by human fleets. Former Federation species would retain their cultures and local autonomy, but they would never again control their own destiny. You have 24 hours to accept these terms, Jake announced. Refusal will result in immediate military occupation and the complete dissolution of your governments. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Chancellor Valtar made one last attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of his civilization. Admiral Morrison, he called out, his ancient voice cracking with desperation. Surely there is some room for compromise, some way to preserve the dignity of our peoples. Jake paused at the chamber's entrance and turned back to face the alien, who had condemned his species to death. Chancellor, he said softly, 8 years ago my people begged for your help. We offered our friendship, our loyalty, and our lives in service to the Federation. You responded by throwing us away like garbage. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Today, you beg for mercy from the same species you abandoned. You offer your submission to the people you deemed expendable. The difference is that we, unlike you, understand the value of keeping our subjects alive. With that, Jake Morrison walked out of the chamber, leaving behind the broken remnants of a galactic government that had destroyed itself through its own cruelty. The Federation was dead. In its place rose the human galactic empire, built on the bones of those who had forgotten that mercy could not be taken for granted, and that betrayal always carried a price. The galaxy was finally at peace. It was the peace of the conquered, ruled by those who had learned that survival required strength, and that strength could never again be trusted to others. Humanity had won. The cost of that victory would echo through the stars for generations to come.